It's a blistering December day in 2022, the kind of heat that bakes the pavement. Aaron Carl Labrook, the president of the Rebels Motorcycle Club in Western Australia, is cruising along in his shiny BMW, grinning like he's got the world in his pocket. Little does he know, he's about to make a massive mistake that's going to bring the whole club to its knees. The cops pull him over, and what they find is jaw-dropping, a whopping $210,000 in cash. This isn't just another routine bust, this is the start of the Rebels' downfall. A few weeks later, the club's boss and a well-known horse trainer appear in court over a bust during the Christmas season, accused of trying to disguise $500,000 as holiday gifts. Investigators believe that Kelly Clay, a high-profile figure in the horse racing world, and Brook were the masterminds behind the scheme. And as the news explains, their connection goes way deeper than anyone realized. Since that day, the Rebels have been fighting to keep everything together, dealing with betrayal and the looming threat of the club collapsing. For motorcycle clubs, especially the Rebels, loyalty is everything. But when that loyalty is broken, the consequences are serious. Getting kicked out is the least of your worries. In some cases, it's a matter of life and death. So, what happens when a longtime leader of the Rebels feels like he's been stabbed in the back by his own president? Well, that's exactly what went down between Brook and Damon Five, the national president of the Rebels. This is a tale about loyalty, betrayal, and the price you pay when you break the trust of those closest to you. Carl Labrook's arrest could very well mark the end of the Rebels in Western Australia, a chapter in their story that's been written in crime and controversy for years. Not much is known about Labrook's early life, but one thing's clear: he was a criminal from the start. Labrook's criminal record stretches way back, tied up with violent crimes, drugs, financial scams, and even high-speed chases. If you're wondering why he's been under the police's radar for the last 20 years, his past might just be the answer. Add to that his connections to heavyweights like Rebel Rick, and it's easy to see why the cops have had their eye on him for so long. His first brush with the law, it dates all the way back to 2001. Carl Labrook's criminal journey took a wild turn back in the early 2000s. After being locked up for dealing drugs with several other Rebels gang members, he was part of a huge bust when the gang set up a drug operation at the Metropolis Hotel. The cops came down hard on them, and Labrook's supposed rehabilitation after his time in jail turned out to be a joke. Instead of turning his life around, he just stepped up his game by moving into manufacturing drugs. In 2010, the police caught up with him again, but by then, Brook had made a fortune and earned serious street cred in the underground Aussie scene. Most people would think that 2 stints in prison would help someone change, but not Carl Labrook. In 2013, he found himself back behind bars after a high-speed chase with the cops, which ended in a crash and him going straight to prison. After serving his time for that, it seemed like Brook might have turned over a new leaf, but his ongoing ties with the Rebels soon proved otherwise. In December 2022, Carl Labrook hit the headlines once again, but this time, it could be the one that sends him away for a long time. Labrook had been under police surveillance for over 20 years, and even though he knew the cops were always watching him, he still made a huge mistake. While driving his flashy BMW, Brook had a suspicious package in the back seat, even though he wasn't supposed to be driving. It almost seemed like he had a death wish. The police stopped him, and instead of trying to run, like in 2013, they searched his car. In the back seat, they found 2 cases wrapped up like Christmas presents. When the cops opened them, they discovered way more than festive surprises. Inside the wrapping, they found stacks of cold, hard cash, a total of $210,000. Yep, over $200,000 in cash. And if that wasn't bad enough for Labrook, luck, or more likely his own confession, led police to Kelly Clay's car shortly after. When the cops raided Kelly Clay's house, they hit the jackpot. Just like Labrook's stash, Clay was found with $250,000 wrapped in the same Christmas paper. It was game over for them both. The two were slapped with charges for possession of an unlawfully obtained property, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. What followed was a whirlwind of trouble that neither of them saw coming. After Kelly Clay's conviction and sentencing, Carl Labrook has been surprisingly cooperative with the police, especially considering his usual attitude towards the law. His latest court appearance made it clear that he's facing an uphill battle, with the prosecution having him backed into a corner. Labrook's arrest was caught on camera, and with his history as a repeat offender, it seemed like there was no way out for him. But Labrook wasn't ready to give up just yet. He decided to take an unconventional route to fight for his freedom, no matter what it took, even if it meant throwing his dead best friend under the bus or breaking the sacred rebel's code of honor. When the court asked him about the $400,000 in cash, Labrook claimed it was from membership fees for the Rebels Club. He went on to explain that he was storing the money at Kelly Clay's house because his wife had threatened to burn it. At the time, his wife was struggling with severe postnatal depression and, in a fit of rage, had made threats to destroy the money. But it wasn't this revelation that shocked everyone. What Labrook said next left the entire country in disbelief, and the underworld buzzing with gossip. He spoke about Nick Martin, the Rebels president in Western Australia, who was also his best friend. Martin had been murdered in 2020, shot by a sniper while watching drag races with his family at the crowded Kwinana Motorplex. The man responsible for the fatal shot admitted his guilt, but Labrook's revelation about Martin took things to a whole new level. Labrook told the court that he had confronted Martin hours before his death in a meeting that lasted over 4 hours. Why? Because Labrook had been orchestrating a coup against his best friend. According to Labrook, Martin had been using Rebels membership money to renovate his mansion, stealing from the very club he led. In Labrook's eyes, this was a betrayal so severe that Martin had to be removed. And while Martin wasn't happy about it, he didn't live long enough to fight back. Just months after the coup, he was killed by the sniper. This bombshell about Martin sent shockwaves through Australia's underground scene. Martin had been a respected figure in the Rebels, so to hear these accusations about him in a court of law was completely unexpected. In the Rebels, there's an unspoken rule. You never speak ill of your leader, especially not in a public setting like court. But Labrook broke that rule without hesitation. The trial has clearly taken its toll on Labrook, and it's easy to understand why he decided to cooperate with the police in hopes of easing his situation. At the time, he probably thought this case was the worst thing he'd ever face. But what came next proved to be far worse. In 2023, the courts managed to get an anti-consorting order against Labrook. This order effectively cut him off from communicating with his fellow bikers, who were like family to him. This isolation has left Labrook vulnerable, and the police know it. He could very well be at his weakest point yet. Carl Labrook has also found himself in the middle of an investigation for a drive-by shooting in Baldivis, where a Mongol gang member's house was shot up. The police have strong reasons to believe that Labrook was involved, but even though his legal troubles have been nightmarish, they don't even begin to compare to the hell he's been facing. From the Rebels' national president, Damon V. Labrook has seen his fair share of heartache during his years with the Rebels. He's watched friends, and what he considers family, die because of their loyalty to the club. He's seen others go to prison for years on end. Through all this, he's stuck by the Rebels, remaining a loyal member for over 25 years. But when Damon Vive questioned his loyalty and integrity just after his court appearance, Labrook was furious. Labrook fired back, insisting that he held no ill will toward Nick Martin, who had been his best friend. In fact, he'd even spoken at Martin's funeral. He remembered Martin as a hardworking guy, although their early years together hadn't been easy. Labrook shared a memory from their past when he convinced Martin to take a job with him. They ended up confronting a man who owed Martin money. While Labrook went 5 houses down to the guy's mom's place, Martin came charging out of the front door, balancing a brand new massive plasma TV, which was rare back then. Labrook couldn't understand why Damon Vi would accuse him of lying about his friendship with Martin. After Labrook's testimony in court, Damon V was furious and demanded Labrook submit the court transcripts so that V could determine if he had broken the Rebels' code of honor. Labrook, already facing a ton of trouble, shot back angrily, telling V to get the transcripts like everyone else. This sparked even more tension between them. V threatened to punish Labrook, but before that could happen, Labrook made a huge decision. He handed in his colors and quit the club he had called home for over 30 years. This move shocked the Rebels. After Labrook's testimony, the National Rebels executive accused him of selling out and threatened him with punitive action. In retaliation, Labrook quit and walked away from the Rebels for good. But things didn't end there. The West Australian chapter of the Rebels, which Labrook had led, agreed with everything he had said about Nick Martin. They backed Labrook's claims that Martin had stolen from them and had ruled over them with an iron fist. They had no issue with Labrook telling the truth, even in a court of law. When Damon Fiv pressured LeBrook into resigning, the West Australian chapter stood by him in solidarity. In an unprecedented move, 37 members of the West Australian Rebels chapter followed LeBrook's lead and quit the club as well. This mass resignation was the biggest in Rebels history, and it became known as the Great Resignation in the Australian biker community. It was a defining moment for the Rebels, marking the collapse of an era. The mass resignation sent shockwaves through the underground world and might just signal the end of the Rebels as we know them in Western Australia. The 37 members who left the West Australian chapter didn't follow the usual tradition of leaving their Harley bikes behind. They took them with them as a bold act of defiance against Damon Five. Now, it looks like they'll either join another club or possibly even start a new one under Carl LeBrook, assuming he doesn't end up serving a long prison sentence. The Rebels are currently locked in a brutal battle with the Mongols, with many Rebels members already behind bars because of it. The resignation of over 36 members means the Rebels are at their weakest, and the Mongols are likely on track to win the war on the West Coast. The end of the Rebels could be on the horizon, but what might come sooner is LeBrook's time in prison. The resignation was also sparked by what many members see as mismanagement and poor leadership by Damon Five, who has struggled to keep the club united since taking control. Carl LeBrook is officially no longer a member of the Rebels, but his legal battles are far from over. With his criminal history, if he's found guilty of the charges against him, he could be looking at a long stint behind bars, and the police will be hoping for just that. His accomplice, Kelly Clay, has already been convicted, which makes it seem likely that LeBrook will follow the same fate. Even if the charge of possession of stolen goods doesn't stick, the charge of driving without authority might be enough to land LeBrook a prison sentence, though probably a shorter one. Whatever the final outcome, one thing is certain: the Rebels and the Australian underworld will never be the same. Whether this marks the beginning of a new era or the fall of the Rebels, only time will tell.